making local food a healthy business. The example of Neal's Yard Dairy, a cheese maturing and selling business from London, England. Neal's Yard Dairy was founded in 1979, and it was originally founded as a micro dairy in central London, right in Covent Garden, a very busy place where we had to bring milk in from the country. What the founder, Randolph Hodgson, decided after a year struggling with micro dairying was that his skill set really wasn't in cheese making. His skill set was in maturing, and his skill set was in selling. And he had had customers who were interested, who came into the shop when it was a micro dairy to talk about cheese. And from there, he learned that there were actually exceptional cheeses around that he could go collect and then bring back to London, mature on, and sell. So that's what he decided would be his future. He thought, I love British cheese and I want to make it work. So he used his technical know-how and he used his experience from his failure so that he could build a business that he thought could make money for him and could be good for the community. The one thing he realized was that if he was going to succeed with that, the real thing for making it work was building trusting relationships with his cheesemakers and with customers, and then with the other people around him. And he knew that those trusting relationships really depended on him being honest and fair, and also incredibly knowledgeable about what he was going to do. So he repurposed it, and the business was slowly growing. So what does it look like now? Well, now we have just over 70 employees. We have a London facility for maturing where we get cheeses, we bring them in, and then we have 3 railway arches filled with different maturing temperatures in different rooms. Then we have 2 shops, one in Covent Garden and one in Borough Market. And then we have trade sales throughout the United Kingdom and throughout the world. Last year, we sold just over 500,000 kilos of cheese. 49% of it is actually raw milk cheese. 51% is pasteurized, and all of it is from a smaller scale production. We sell 60 cheeses from the UK and Ireland, and we buy from about 23 farmhouses and 13 creameries. So we're not buying from big factories, and we're not selling factory-made cheese. And over that 40-year period, we've managed to maintain what is a singular specialization in farmhouse and creamery-produced cheeses from the UK and Ireland. We didn't think at some point when we were losing money or not making enough money, we should get French cheese or we should buy an American cheese. We thought we should stick with what we're doing and get better and better at it. So the next question is, well, how did we get to where we are? And the 2 things I would say, the primary things, are having a vision and building those very important relationships. So a vision for us, it sort of developed originally for the first 10 years with Randolph Hodgson's vision alone. He set the tone for the business, and he was very good at it. He was the founder, and he knew what he wanted, and that worked really well for us. But as the business started to grow, and other people have ideas and things, we realized that we needed to have more perspectives in that vision, to make it more formal, to make it something that wasn't reliant on one person, but allowed everybody to participate in some way. So we dedicate now a collective amount of time, and quite a bit of it, to discuss, to test, to challenge, and to evolve our vision so that we're current and we're not stagnant. And most importantly, so that we're evolving it with every new employee who comes in and everybody can be on board with it. But for us, a vision involves 4 crucial things: a mission, principles that allow you to go toward achieving that mission, business objectives aimed at achieving the mission, and then integrating, this is very important, integrating all of those things in the everyday running of the business and in business planning. Not just doing it and parking it somewhere on a bookshelf and forgetting about it, but making it a live process that's continually pushing the concept of your business. So our mission is a very simple one. in concept. It is to improve British cheese. Nothing more, nothing less. The principles that we use, the guiding principles that we use to get there right now, and these change as we discuss it, but the ones we've been working on for a while are simplicity, accountability, clarity, professionalism, awareness, kindness, and generosity. So when we go about making decisions, or if we're struggling with something, or if we don't know what the answer is, from the person on the shop floor to the owner of the business, they can think to themselves, I'm really struggling right now. What can guide me? And then they can look at those words and those concepts, and they can help to form what the next step might be. So that's why we have them. It's just a sort of benchmark for allowing you to make better decisions. So the next thing after the mission and the principles is objectives. Objectives for any business are constantly changing depending on the condition of the business and also the condition around us. But the key thing about objectives is that all staff members have to be engaged in setting them, and they have to feel integrated and integral to achieving those. It's not just something that comes down from the big boss on the 4th floor saying these are objectives for the year. It's saying these are some of the things we're thinking about. What does your team think about it? How do you guys think you can get to that? So really making sure people are engaged that way. And then the other thing with objectives is that they should be achieved using the principles as guidelines for it. So if your team comes up with an objective to increase growth by 5%, and their way of doing that is selling things cheaply or not paying attention to quality and, maybe taking business away from their neighbor, that's not really how we would do business. So that is not an option that's open for us in terms of achieving our objectives. And everybody really should know that because they've engaged with these things in the business level. So now we're just going to talk a little bit about how those things get implemented. It's really lovely if you have all these words, these are how we do it, but does it work? Because fundamentally, at the end of the day, it's got to work. It's got to improve British cheese for us, and we have to be making money so that we can have a sustainable business. So as an example, in terms of improving British cheese, one of the benchmarks for understanding whether or not that is if more people are coming into the cheese industry. So in the past 15 years, we have had the production of 13 new cheesemakers come into our selection. 3 of those are specific English-style cheeses, and 7 of them are farmhouse, which is also something that's very important to us, that we're maintaining that way of producing food at the farmhouse level. So we can look at that, improving those benchmarks for saying that in our minds, we have helped to improve British cheese, that those things are coming on stream, and we see those as markers of our success, along with looking at our bottom line, which we do look at all the time, because we have a lot of people, families of our staff, families of cheesemakers, all of those people depend on us to stay in business. So we're always looking at our bottom line as well, and making sure that that's healthy. But beyond that, constant vigilance and those things, the central strategy that we use to achieve our objectives, those things that we try to achieve in order to push us forward on our mission of improving British cheese, our strategy is to build trusting and meaningful relationships. So not just with our customers, which is absolutely important, but also with our suppliers, the cheesemakers, and also potential cheesemakers and suppliers. A really big one is trusting and meaningful relationships with our staff. If we don't have that with our staff, the whole thing's not going to work. They have to be engaged, and we have to be engaged with them. Then there's the larger cheese industry and the larger food industry. We want to be able to stand up proudly so that everybody knows that we are honest and forthright in what we do. And then the last one is regulators. Those people that make sure that we are staying within the law, which we make sure we do, and then they double check, but also having really good, trusting, and meaningful relationships with them. So we'll just look at a few of those things in separation so that you can get a sense of how we do that. So customers. We work to know our customers in the moment, so who's ever coming in the door, but also thinking about them in the long term, because it's those long-term returning customers that are our bread and butter. So for us, good service and good relationships come with engaging and respectful service, not pushing things on people, not being overly familiar, but giving them what they want. Being interactive and customer-led, so not us telling them what's good for them, but them coming to us and saying, this is kind of what I'm looking for, what do you have? And us being able to really knowledgeably service those needs for them. Developing a sort of layered education for them. So not everybody is that interested in raw milk cheese production or the infinite different ways that starter cultures can be made and taste. So we as cheesemongers have to be able to read our customer to know you're the person who really wants to know the infinite detail about cheese making, and you're the person who just wants to have a really great cheese board for your dinner party. And that's essential that we know that. And then the other thing is to always provide complete and honest information. For us, it's all about our customers knowing what our product is, where it came from, and what we've done with it to get it to them and to us. And the next really huge relationship that we spend an awful lot of time on is our relationship with our producers. Primarily, this is cheesemakers. And with those, we have to have honest and constructive, and also very importantly, long-term relationships with them. Cheesemaking is an up and down business. Sometimes your cheese is tasting fantastic. You have no idea why, but you know that it is. And then sometimes it's really horrible. And as far as you're convinced, you've been doing everything exactly the same. So as a customer of those cheesemakers, we have to be able to go in and say, so the cheese, we're having a little bit of problem with it right now. This is what we think, what's happening with you. And we have to be able to say that in a way that they're willing to hear it. Because if we come in and say, your cheese isn't good right now, we're not going to carry it, that's no incentive for them to think about making their product better. It goes against improving British cheese. So that's a really big one for us. We tend to go and visit cheesemakers regularly. We have what we refer to as selection runs, and we do many of them throughout the year. Every month we go up to a series of 6 cheesemakers in the north. Every month we go to cheddar makers in the southwest. And we have different runs that take us to different places at different times. So all of our cheesemakers will be visited once within the year, and most of them will be visited more than that. And that's a really important time for us, not just to feedback what's happening in our shop and with our sales, but for us to learn about what they're doing, what their struggles are, what their happinesses are, where they think it's going, where they think it's going next year, 4 years, and in 20 years. So that we have that kind of dialogue with them, and it allows them to plan and allows us to plan. So the other thing that we've noticed with cheesemakers is cheesemaking can be a really isolating job. And a lot of cheesemakers, if they are just day in, day out on their farm or in their creamery, doing the same thing, making the same product, it can be quite a lonesome job. And they can start to feel a little bit isolated. I've had quite a few cheesemakers who mentioned to me that they're isolated from their cheesemaking colleagues. So what we've, over the many years, worked toward doing is establishing events which allow cheesemakers to come together and for them to form their own bonds together. So whether that's welcoming a group of cheesemakers to Neal's Yard Dairy to a talk or to a discussion session that we're working on to learn more about their style of cheese, or inviting them to come to external events that we're doing, like to the Burley horse trials or to some kind of market. We'll invite them down to it, a group of them. sharing information, encouraging them if they're struggling so that they see one another as a resource. At the beginning, that wasn't so regular, but now we don't play a role in that much. They just do it naturally because they have a firm bond. And then the other one that's really important for us is helping cheesemakers through tricky patches. So I kind of alluded to this before, but cheesemaking, like I said, is an up and down business, and it's an up and down quality thing. And for us, one of the things that's really important is that we can stick with people through their downs and not only just laud them in their ups, because really the struggle is when you're struggling. And so we try as much as possible to stick with cheesemakers to help them through those times, whether that's with information, support on the phone, going up and seeing what's happening, technical help, and sometimes with financial help to make sure that they know that they're not alone in what they do. So I've talked a bit about the cheesemaker on cheesemaker thing, how those cheesemaker relationships work. Just a couple of examples of those beyond what I've mentioned is organizing something that we support, which is the Science of Artisan Cheese Conference, which we help to fund, but we don't organize. Our quality assurance manager organizes that. We also will have them down for different industry sort of talks about technical things that they're doing. And then they organize things on their own, which is great, which they also invite us to, which is very nice. So the next really important group of people is staff. So your staff, in terms of building a healthy business out of local food, your staff is very important. They have to be knowledgeable. They have to be comfortable with awkward questions about why does that cost so much more? I could go to the supermarket and get that cheaper. So they have to be knowledgeable and they have to know your business. And it's really important that in order to do that, you work with them. So we spend a lot of time working together and striving for a balanced and engaging work environment for people. We don't demand all kinds of things from them because we know that they have to have a decent work-life balance, but we work hard for them to be as best as they can be. So just a couple of statistics on the type of staffing situation we've developed over the year. 24% of our current staff of the 70 have worked for Neal's Yard Dairy for at least 10 years. 43% of them have worked for at least 5 years. 18 former staff members now own their own food businesses, many of them around London, and many of them are customers. 4 of them are cheesemakers, and 8 of them own their own cheese shops. 3 of our either existing or former employees have written quite successful books and groundbreaking books. And that's kind of important for us as well in terms of pushing for people to feel like they can branch out and come up with their own ideas. So all of these things work together for us to develop low staff turnover, high levels of in-house training that we work on to make sure that they're just not getting somebody else's idea and bringing it, but they know how we do things. It's also really important that you have professional development opportunities. So if you come in as a shop person, working as a monger behind the slate, you can think to yourself, I could maybe become either the manager of that shop, or I could go into even the finance department if that's what I really want to do. It's just people have to have a sense of opportunity to be happy. And all of those things work only if you have open and clear communication. So if people are afraid of their boss or their manager, or if they feel like no one's listening to them, or they can't put significant impact into how the job can change and how the business can be better, then all of those other things that you do, all the training, all the, special things that you do aren't going to work, because people have to feel free to communicate freely. So the other things that we do, and these are just sort of extras on top. We do cheesemonger to cheesemonger things. One of them is the milk jam competition, where we have different cheesemongers from around England and London who compete with our cheesemongers in a cheesemaking competition. So they get education, but part of the real purpose of it is that they get to know other people within their profession, to develop a sense of actually cheese selling being a profession. We've developed a series of classes for cheese like mongers, other mongers that we sell to come learn about how we sell cheese. So we hold these classes called the Monger School. This is how we cut. This is how we wrap. How do you do it? Did this work for you? And then we do also a thing called the Taste School, which is more oriented toward chefs and people who are front of house in restaurants, so that they understand the different aspects of tasting British cheese. But one of the things we do work really hard on is our relationship with the food regulators and food safety authorities. One way that we develop trust in that regard is that we have developed a really extensive, comprehensive food safety system for our business. So every single person who comes into our business has training on those very important things about cross-contamination, about cleaning, about making sure that cheeses go in the right temperatures in the right places for maturing versus for selling. And all of that's really important, that we test our food safety system. So we do microbiological testing on a regular basis of our environment and of our cheeses. We look to make sure that the cheesemakers also have very comprehensive food safety systems and testing systems. And most importantly, from a regulator trust standpoint, is we are recording it meticulously. So everything that we do, we can prove that we do. So that's one end of it, making sure that through our food safety system, we're building that trust. Another thing is that we have to stay really on top of the research. So we have a dedicated department within Neal's Yard Dairy. It's 2 people who look at quality systems, and they are very involved in maintaining relationships with the sort of cutting edge of cheese science, so that we really understand things like moistures, temperatures, acidities, and how those things affect food safety. So staying on top of the current information, so that when our food regulators come to us, we know as much as we can know, and they know that we take it really seriously. So that's another aspect of it. And then one more thing that we do internally is making sure that when we're talking to our food regulators and food safety people, we are very respectful of their job. They have an important role in maintaining public health, and they take that really seriously. They've studied really hard for it, and they work really hard for it. And their job is on the line if they let something pass that they shouldn't let pass. And we have to respect that. And so we always work with the idea that the 2 of us are working for the same good. We might not think that the answer to get there is necessarily the same, but we both want the same thing in the end, which is safe food for our customers. So if you start with that premise, then you can work with your health authority and your food safety authority, rather than all of a sudden being already in a combative environment, which is never going to get anybody anywhere, really. So those are the 3 sort of in-house things that we do. And then we also do work with technical committees with the British Specialist Cheesemakers Association. The Specialist Cheesemakers Association was a group that Randolph Hodgson, our founder, helped to develop and sustain. And they have a technical committee which has written a handbook and a guidebook for best practice for artisan cheesemakers in Great Britain. And it's constantly updated. And our quality assurance lead, she's on that team, and she helps with that information. And then that group also has a course that they do for environmental health officers. And they can take this course as part of an offering of the Specialist Cheesemakers Association to understand really how raw milk cheese is produced, what factors we currently are thinking are really important with that. And then they can come to different cheesemakers when they're doing their audits with a real sense of knowledge about what that person's doing. So programs like that from the Specialist Cheesemakers Association are super important to helping food regulators understand what raw milk cheese and cheese production generally is all about. So those are the ways that we help to foster those relationships, because they are make or break for our business. So as you can see, we've got all different kinds of relationships going, all of those things that are essential for us to achieve our objectives and to push forward with our mission, which is to improve British cheese, which to us is our local cheese, in a healthy and profitable way for us, for our staff, and for the cheesemakers as well. So much of the artisan cheese movement in the UK grew out of these relationships that I've been talking about. And rather than now just being relationships, as I've alluded to previously, they've become much more like communities, or as I've heard from many of the fellow people in my cheese community, the cheese family. So like all families, we need to have the next generation. It's not going to work if we all just end at this one. So we work for that already, involving children in what we do, doing children's classes, and also having, wherever possible, because it's super important to us that those cheeses continue to be made, the children of cheesemakers coming down and feeling that they're as at home in our shops or in our business as my children are and as the staff's children are and all children are, so that we can develop that family for a long time to come. And that is how we did it at Neal's Yard Dairy.